Case studies, it's interesting because like case studies can be used for like a lot of different things. We've been talking about sales as like a big one, right? Where like you're in like that case, that high pressure situation where like client needs to get something done. Awesome. Here's a case study that sales team could use to show, this is exactly what we did for the same kind of client, and you can demonstrate your expertise like in that conversation. But for different teams, so like marketing, so marketing can use the case studies and use it as source materials for blog posts, social content, even like conference talks. And I remember, Barrel, one of our agencies, they did a project with this brand, Sweet Lawrence, and there was a partnership that they did with Mattel for the Barbie movie. So that case study turned into an opportunity at this big conference, Expo West, where there's a big panel discussion where the CEO, Lucas, moderated a conversation with the client on stage, the person from Mattel, and then basically had a whole conversation that stemmed from this one case study example of a engagement that they had with the client. So it can go way beyond just the one artifact that you're creating for your sales team.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. Yeah, and some other groups. So if you have partnerships, so other partners, agencies, tech partners, etc., who want to understand what you do in more depth, it's good context for them so that they could also send you referrals. Also, if it lives on your website and it's organized cleanly for AEO or SEO, so prospects can also find you through all the search terms and all the relevant points that are embedded within the case study. And then kind of the last thing to think about is for team members, for team members who weren't specifically working on those engagements, but also new team members that join your team and they want to understand, what does this company do? What have they done? And just get some more context. This is like a great library for them to kind of go through and have that become kind of knowledge that gets institutionalized across the company.
Yeah, and I think what you're getting at with kind of how these case studies are getting used is is starting to view, we mentioned it before, like not a cost but really an investment, and with that it becomes an asset, a clear asset, and that's why we talk about like proof library. Like think about it as a this kind of asset library that you have, and part of what makes a really good library is that, you gotta be able to find things, right? You gotta be able to search it in a way. And so, I think one thing that is important, over time is, whether you label it or you put it in different folders or you kind of have kind of some ways to, easily access it. You want to be able to organize a lot of these case studies in a few different ways. So, obviously there's like the easy kind of just by client name, which I think most people do it by, but I think you can go further and you can be like, all right, like let's think of it by wedge, right? And then wedge, we defined it in the past as like the specific problem you're solving for the client, and that gets you in the door. And so this could be like, hey, give me some case studies on conversion optimization, or like some kind of e-commerce replatform, or this retention marketing or lifecycle marketing, or like a brand refresh. So you kind of can have it by these kind of different wedges that might have been why you were hired. And then there's also a trigger kind of way to think about case studies, right? A specific situation for the client that made them act and hire you as an agency. So this could be like, hey, maybe it's a specific fundraising round. Maybe this is like, hey, all the case studies for Series B, venture-backed startups, and this is what we did for them. Or anytime there was a CMO switch, because there could be very specific things that happen when a new CMO comes into a brand, and you got to do some work for it. And other things like a forced replatform, where you're like, you have only like a few months before something gets sunset, so you got to help move the client for whatever reason. All those things you can categorize really well. And then the last part is like, just other characteristics of the client or the brand that you might want to group them by, whether they are kind of, they have some kind of type of investor, maybe PE backed or something, whether it's a size, enterprise, mid-market, SMB, multi-unit, multi-brand, different verticals. So just having your library searchable in these ways, or just kind of organized so that your sales, marketing, partnerships, everybody can just kind of access it in a way with that understood, is going to be huge.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest point is like, if it's hard to use, if you don't have the context, like people are just not going to use it, or they're just going to go off and like just have one-off conversations with people one-on-one versus actually using this as like a true library. And stuff like that is getting easier and easier these days. Is it can live in any kind of format where AI can search it, or all these platforms are really good at searching these keywords. But I think the big thing is just having these case studies rich in everything from not just having the process on what you did, but actually including the outcomes on how you impacted the client, and just really having all of the points covered so that when somebody does look up and try to find a case study, it has the full context about what it is that you did for a client.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's move on to the second component, artifacts. So here, you know, a strong artifact is a sanitized piece of the actual work that shows how the agency thinks and operates. And this is different than a case study because a case study might tell the story of how an engagement happened or the outcome, but the artifact is the actual evidence of the agency's craft. And it's something that's going to be a bit more tangible. You can kind of send it over to a prospect and they can kind of poke around, look at it a bit more closely. So it's less about a claim and more about, oh yeah, this is what you guys are doing and producing along the way to the result. And then the in many respects, hopefully it's like useful on its own, right? The artifact might have value to whoever's looking at it before they engage with you. You go, oh cool, like if it's a checklist or a diagnostic, it's like, oh wow, this is actually helpful for helping us think about it, and we've seen this with like when you show kind of the intake questionnaire, stuff like that. Some people find that really valuable to kind of to take a preview at. And yeah, lastly, like it does, signal depth, right? I think, for a lot of folks, just, living in the slides, it's really hard for the client to wrap their heads around like, all right, is this real? Is this not? And then so I think having an artifact ready really helps. And some examples I'll just quickly talk about is like roadmap templates, right? Diagnostic frameworks, delivery checklists, audit samples, sample sprints, strategy docs that have been kind of cleaned up a little bit, maybe even tear downs, like just all these kind of deliverables that are produced throughout the engagement.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't have to be like a static document too. Like I know one of our agencies in the sales process, they use like a live artifact where they can like pull up a dashboard and show like performance of a specific client or a sanitized version of it, so that they can actually, so the client can see the artifact of what actually happens, and but it's not just a representation of that. But to that point, artifacts can be used, quite a bit in sales, like during that conversation where a client asks like, hey, like what exactly does that look like, or how do you guys actually approach that, and then you can kind of include that as that live demo or those screenshots. The marketing team can use those and turn it into content. So like if there is like a specific diagnostic framework that you use, that could become a blog post, that can become like a LinkedIn podcast topic. So like that could live in many different ways where you can share that and show your expertise. Partnerships again, so sharing it with partners and helping explain like what you do better than just having a little deck on exactly your process on how you do it, but actually here's the artifact of what we actually created. And then again, recruiting and onboarding. So when you want to show candidates or people who join your team like what does the work actually look like, and what do you do, like there's nothing better than to show the actual artifact of what you made for one of the clients.